You know that feeling when HellBoy receives 15% on Rotten Tomatoes and suddenly you don't want to live in this world anymore? Yeah, me too. And just in case you think that this video is a dumb overreaction, and by the way, I checked with dumb people, they said it was okay for me to use that word. Let me put things in perspective. 15 is also the score for white chicks. And I'm just gonna let that sink in for a sec. And look, I know that the scores can adjust as time progresses, but the sad reality is that the damage is done. And even if more well-rounded reviews come in over the next couple of days, HellBoy will never get anywhere near the same rating as some of the most iconic cinematic masterpieces like Mortal Engines or The Nutcracker and the Four Fucking Realms. Honestly, Rotten Tomatoes system is so dumb. And you know what, if the movie was actually bad and I just so happened to like it, I would be willing to accept this insane score. But this clearly isn't the case, since the audience's score is significantly higher than that of the quote-unquote professional opinion. And here I think lies the fundamental problem with this critical consensus. You know, other than the fact that this has got to be the most pretentious sentence ever written. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but from where I'm standing, it sure looks like the critics didn't so much dislike the film, but rather thought that the originals looked better. And whilst beauty might very well be in the eye of the beholder, basing your whole review on the visual style alone is at best a lazy observation, and at worst, willfully ignorant. And look, I get it. It's tempting to jump on the bandwagon whenever the zeitgeist demands for another blockbuster baby to sacrifice. But give me a break. You do know that the original Hellboys were never just a dark fantasy, right? Sure, the aesthetic of Guillermo del Toro interpretation is partially why those movies were so beloved. But for many people, Hellboy is so much more. The real appeal of the character is his longing to belong and the struggle that comes with being ostracized. So it's not his imaginative flair that audiences find appealing, it's the fact that his status as an outcast can literally stand in for any real-life oppression. Hellboy is as universal as an underdog can get, something that this version explored so well by showing us different emotional responses that oppressed people often feel. Ben represented the desire to pass and self-loathing that comes with it, Hellboy the feeling of helplessness in the face of injustice, and the Blood Queen? Well, she was just pure fucking rage. Oh, and there was also learning to accept yourself, like Alice. And even though this isn't exactly an observation to end all observations, it's definitely one that you will only appreciate if you have been on the receiving end of the society's outrage at your mere existence. And since the privilege of talking about arts isn't exactly synonymous with being oppressed, the critics have to default into discussing the technical parts of the movie. So it's not a coincidence that most of the negative reviews for HellBoy concentrate on either the reported production issues, as if there is such thing as a straightforward production anymore. This isn't the golden age of studio systems, you know. No movie is made without creative differences these days. Or they compare the cinematography of Neil Marshall's movie to what they deem to be the superior imagining by Guillermo del Toro. And this is a flawed way of thinking, since those original movies, as good as they are, were never truly representative of what HellBoy is actually about. Sure, the message of not judging a book by its cover was there, but Ron Perlman's character wasn't exactly the ugliest book on the shelf. He was still objectively handsome, in that devil next door type of way. And I don't think he would have actually struggled all that much to integrate into Del Toro's idea of human society, which is a stark comparison to David Harbour's interpretation of the character, a more earnest and realistic depiction of what Hellspawn would actually look like. He is as grotesque and monstrous as the movie can possibly get away with, and that is what ultimately makes his struggles with alienation not only more believable, but also more relatable, especially when placed in juxtaposition with the Blood Queen. Hellboy is good, yet ugly, whilst Nimue is beautiful but evil. And you might think that this is totally no big deal, but in reality, only a handful of movies have ever dared to do this. And in fact, the opposite setup is so prominent in popular entertainment that it even has a name. Beauty equals good. And whilst this isn't something that you are necessarily actively aware of, it is something that you recognize instinctively. Think of any movie or a TV show you would like, and I can almost guarantee you that it follows the same line of thinking. The heroes are always dashing, and the villains, well, they might as well crawl back under the rock from which they came from. And in the rare occurrence that the villains are conventionally beautiful, let's say whenever they are played by Angelina Jolie for example, you can bet your sweet ass that they will be redeemed by the time the credits roll. Same, by the way, goes for any hero that gets deformed. As far as the movies are concerned, losing a limb or getting a scar is one short step away from owning a death ray. And since HellBoy is meant to be a giant FU to this line of thinking, I find it kinda ironic that the criticism the movie attracts the most is just how goddamn unattractive this whole thing is. And far be it for me to question the esteemed gentlemen of the Academy, but it seems to me like you might have missed the point. And listen, I'm not trying to reason my way out of the fact that HellBoy did have its flaws. In particular, it relied too much on special effects, which didn't always look as sharp as the hyper-realistic gore demanded it to be. But what I am trying to say is that focusing solely on the way things look doesn't automatically make your criticism valid. And it sure as hell doesn't make you the champion of HellBoy. If anything, it makes you the villain.